Hi, my name is Benjamín Juarez Echenique. I am Professor Emeritus of Fine Arts at Boston University and the corresponding member of Mexico's Academy of History. And I'm delighted to be with you today in this incredible event from such an incredible institution as Dartmouth College. Mexico's birth is a result of the cataclysmic collision of the largest empire in Mesoamerica and the Spain that had just regained control of its territory after centuries of Arab rule. In 1521, the great city of Tenochtitlan fell to an army of a few Spaniards led by Hernán Cortés, with thousands of Indian allies tired of the heavy taxes and cruelty of Aztec rule. Pedro de Gante, the learned Flemish Franciscan friar, a brother of Emperor Charles V, established the Colegio de Santa Cruz de Tlatelolco in 1533, 214 years before Dartmouth. Originally a Calmecac, a school for native young noblemen, it was officially inaugurated as a Catholic school on Epiphany Day 1536 to teach Mexicans the Catholic doctrine, along with liberal arts, Latin, and of course music. The Franciscans were astonished with the talent, eagerness, discipline of the Mexicans, who were soon not only playing and performing European music, but also composing European polyphony of the highest caliber. Let's listen to a brief fragment of early 17th century Mexican polyphony. Another Franciscan, Bernardino de Sahagún, at the Colegio de Santa Cruz, recruited a team of 30 learned students to create an encyclopedia of the Aztec world, the religion, calendars, the natural world, geography, and social structures. The native artists were extraordinary as the trilingual grammarians who wrote more than 2,000 pages in Latin, Spanish, and Nahuatl. These young converts produced an incredible treasure of painting, narratives, and this is now the prized possession of the Medici Library in Florence. with this rich heritage of religious beliefs, the natives created a mosaic that is now known as Syncretism. So their goddess Tonantzin became the Virgin of Guadalupe, and local people kept dancing and learned to paint religious images, also to build palaces and churches with the European models, but always with a local flavor. A third root of Mexican identity comes from African slaves. Even Cortés had one, perhaps two, African slaves that came with him, but very soon they came in large numbers to work in the rich silver mines, cash crops, and to share with all of us their wonderful music. By 1551, Mexico had the first university in North America, and it was on the same level of excellence as the University of Salamanca, as well as cathedrals, churches, convents, palaces. It was really one of the main cities in the world. And of course, music could be compared to that made in any European capital. But unfortunately, this privilege was mostly reserved for white, Spanish, and the mixed-race Mexicans lived in slums and were marginalized. Even talented painters and musicians, if they were not 100% pure Spanish blood, would have problems in getting all the recognition that their talent merited. This had to stop. This had to change. Spanish colonial times were full of shadows and light too. And finally, with the Napoleonic occupation of Spain, Mexico decided to become an independent country. This was a very difficult time for Mexico. The 19th century was an empire followed by a republic with Mexico's favorite villain, Santana, followed by another failed second empire, finally came to an end with the first 100% Mexican Indian president of Mexico, Benito Juarez. Unfortunately, following Benito Juarez, we have the figure of Porfirio Diaz, who came again to look at French models for progress and development. And all the great businesses were in the hands of foreigners. More and more, we heard English spoken in the mines, in the railroad yards, and people were saying that Mexico was like a stepmother to Mexicans and mother to gringos. So another calamitous time had to come to an end and really bring the progress and the prosperity to all of Mexico. At the beginning of the 20th century, we find a group of painters and poets and musicians who really struggled to find the voice of Mexico. Among them, Manuel Maria Ponce, is really the dominant figure. Because he was like a musical chameleon. He could write music that sounds Cuban. He wrote a trove of guitar music for Andrés Segovia that sounds Baroque and Spanish at times. And particularly in his songs, because he both collected Mexican folk songs and created new songs that sound like 100% Mexican and have become part of the repertoire of concert halls, drawing rooms of wealthy señoritas, and also street musicians that play them everywhere. The music of Manuel M. Ponce is really the heart of Mexican music at the beginning of the 20th century. And then came the revolution. 1910 marks a year when a group of followers of Madero, who had won the elections in a democratic way, wanted to bring him into Mexico City to assume the presidency. But Porfirio Diaz, who had been in power and who was already in his 80s, couldn't retire. Finally he left, but the next decade was very, very difficult, with different groups, different ideals of revolutionaries from the south, looking at agrarian land rights and agricultural priorities, whereas people in the north were more interested into either a democratic government or just finally stability to make things work and prosperity move forward for all Mexicans. Mary Coffey has already guided you through the wonderful murals of Orozco, so I'm not going to dwell too much on these three incredible artists, Rivera, Siqueiros, and Orozco. Orozco is my favorite. Also, the most known women artists of all times, Frida Kahlo, an example of resilience, of creativity, and just of exploration in so many ways. In music, we have two very interesting figures. On one hand, Carlos Chavez, who created institutions, who was a great politician and also interesting, if perhaps uneven composer, and the great talent of that time, Silvestre Revueltas. But Silvestre Revueltas, like Mussorgsky, like Hemingway, came with an unruly character, and he was also a victim of alcoholism. So he died a few days short of his 41st birthday. But his music will live forever. And his is some of the best music Mexico ever produced. Claudio Lomnitz, a Mexican intellectual, has said that at the center of Mexico's totem of ideas is death. But death as respect to previous generations. And that's why we find many contemporary artists and contemporary composers creating works around that idea of death and the past. This is also part of Mexico's traditional celebration of Dia de los Muertos. But right now, we are living in a golden age of arts and music. Composers like Gabriel Ortiz, Enrico Chapela, and many others have their works performed every week by international first-rank orchestras, both in the United States and in Europe. Let's listen to a brief fragment of Calaca by Gabriel Ortiz with the great Cuarteto Latinoamericano.